أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة يقاتلون في سبيل الله فيقتلون ويقتلون وعدا عليه حقا في التوراة والإنجيل والقرآن، ومن أوفى بعهده من الله فاستبشروا ببيعكم الذي بايعتم به، وذلك هو الفوز العظيم. التائبون العابدون الحامدون السائحون الراكعون الساجدون الآمرون بالمعروف والناهون عن المنكر والحافظون لحدود الله، وبشر المؤمنين. ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا أن يستغفروا للمشركين ولو كانوا أولي قربى من بعد ما تبين لهم أنهم أصحاب الجحيم. وما كان استغفار إبراهيم لأبيه إلا عن موعدة وعدها إياه، فلما تبين له أنه عدو لله تبرأ منه، إن إبراهيم لأواه حليم. وما كان الله ليضل قوما بعد إذ هداهم حتى يبين لهم ما يتقون، إن الله بكل شيء عليم. إن الله له ملك السماوات والأرض يحيي ويميت، وما لكم من دون الله من ولي ولا نصير. لقد تاب الله على النبي والمهاجرين والأنصار الذين اتبعوه في ساعة العسرة من بعد ما كاد يزيغ قلوب فريق منهم ثم تاب عليهم، إنه بهم رءوف رحيم. وعلى الثلاثة الذين خلفوا حتى إذا ضاقت عليهم الأرض بما رحبت وضاقت عليهم أنفسهم وظنوا أن لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه ثم تاب عليهم ليتوبوا، إن الله هو التواب الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. ما كان لأهل المدينة ومن حولهم من الأعراب أن يتخلفوا عن رسول الله ولا يرغبوا بأنفسهم عن نفسه، ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ ولا نصب ولا مخمصة في سبيل الله ولا يطؤون موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح إن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون يا أيها الذين آمنوا قاتلوا الذين يلونكم من الكفار وليجدوا فيكم غلظة واعلموا أن الله مع المتقين وإذا ما أنزلت سورة فمنهم من يقول أيكم زادته هذه إيمانا فأما الذين آمنوا فزادتهم إيمانا وهم يستبشرون وأما الذين في قلوبهم مرض فزادتهم رجسا إلى رجسهم وماتوا وهم كافرون أولا يرون أنهم يفتنون في كل عام مرة أو مرتين ثم لا يتوبون ولا هم يذكرون وإذا ما أنزلت سورة نظر بعضهم إلى بعض هل يراكم من أحد ثم انصرفوا صرف الله قلوبهم بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم فإن تولوا فقل حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم صدق الله العظيم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh on this beautiful Friday evening to all our viewers. Sure. Today we have Hammad Khan Saab with us, who is a solicitor practicing since 2005. He does other projects in the community as well, including being a president of the Manchester Central Masjid. And today our topic is Islamophobia and how to stop it. First of all, Hammad Saab, I'd like to ask yourself, does love really make the world go round?
It's a very deep question right at the beginning.
Yeah, well, there you go. I told you we go straight into it. Yeah. The reason why I'm asking is because, you know, Islam is said to start off with love, and the vehicle that you ride on is love, and the destination is also love. So if people had a bit more understanding about Islam, we wouldn't have Islamophobia.
I don't think anything goes anywhere without any love or understanding. I think there are some basic foundations of everything that we share with each other. Love and understanding of each other are the basic criteria then upon which you can build further. And if that's not there, then we struggle to get off the ground to begin with.
Absolutely.
So I think, yes, love does make the world go around.
Yeah, just wanted to make that clear for the audience. Yeah, it's all love. Acha, and we all for love.
What about the science and all?
The science, inshallah, science is the next topic. Acha, so can you please first of all define Islamophobia for us?
I think Islamophobia has been treated primarily as a hate crime.
Right. So that's the legal side of it.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's been understood by the public primarily as a hate crime. And I think before we begin to classify anything, you need to understand how it takes root in society.
Yeah.
So if you go to the basic foundations of any prejudice, any racism, any discrimination, you go to the basic foundations. So in order to discriminate against anybody, it doesn't matter what background you're from, it doesn't matter where you're from, you have to identify markers first and then categorize those markers. So for example, you could the markers could be the way somebody dresses. It could be that people have a beard. That's a marker. It could be the area that people reside in. So for example, you get pockets of people living in certain areas, predominantly Muslim areas we call them, or Asian areas, or predominantly white areas.
Or they call them ghettos.
Yes. So you begin to classify the markers, and then those markers are used to identify people. Once you begin to identify a group or a class of people by certain markers, you begin to develop an idea how to identify those individuals. And if you then prejudice based on those markers, you then begin to discriminate, and that's how racism takes hold in society. And I think as far as Islamophobia is concerned, I think my view is that I think primarily we have to go back to classifying it as a racism rather than a hate crime only. A hate crime is because if you look at racism, it's much more broader.
Okay.
It's not necessarily limited to just hate. It is classifying people by markers and identifying them by those markers.
So are we going more legal here now than just to...
No, I think we have to try and understand it in those terms.
Okay.
Is this something that do other people in the legal world share this with you, or is this your personal take on this?
No, this is my personal view. I think the discussion around this has been limited in public. I think public are afraid to talk about it.
Right.
I think people are in all walks of life. You find discrimination and racism is present in all facets of life. People are not as open to discuss it in public. Primarily, if you talk about policy making, for example, or you talk about legal issues, those are primarily would be discussed in Parliament. Now, if you look at Parliament and you look at how many, for example, Muslim MPs we have, and then you consider what types of discussions we actually have and how many feel free to say what they really want to say, it's a very, very small number. It's because there is fear within people that if they speak about it openly, they would be targeted, or they themselves would become classified or designated or marked as hate mongers or people who are spreading hate. In fact, the discussion around this, in my view, has to be open and it has to be understood. And as I say, I think it's a form of racism. It's not just hate. It's the very root of it is based in racism.
Right. Okay. So it's targeting a particular group in the community. When you say fear, what I really fail to understand when people say that is this fear of losing your position for people who are in position? Because there are charities, there are organizations in England that clearly talk about Islamophobia.
There are, and I think, again, each and individual person in those positions would have to answer that question for them. I mean, I'll give you a very, I think my first, I would say my first experience of
your personal experience
of Islamophobia or racism was I basically studied law, and I came from another profession, and when I came to study law, I went down the route, it's called a GDL route, where you study the 3-year course in 1 year. So we were studying that, and at the time I started to apply for positions in law firms. Now the legal market is very competitive. It's very, very, probably one of the most competitive markets in my view that you would get in England. Right. I had a senior lecturer at my university, and when I was applying for jobs, I decided I was going to start right at the top, go for the magic circle firms and work my way down.
Okay.
So I went for the biggest firm that I could think of and applied there. I applied there, went through the interview stage, and very, very close to getting the position I went for, and I didn't get it. I then came back and I sat with my head of department, and we went through what happened, what the questions were, etc., so I could get his feedback. He said to me, at the time I used to have a very short beard. He said to me, he said, you want to get a job in a top firm, shave your beard off and you'll get it.
No, that's your first experience.
That's my first experience.
Can I just add to something there? After I finished my education, my father had a friend who had a clothing warehouse. So he made me work there for 2 years, lifting boxes and, getting all dirty and the rest of it, and long hours and less pay. And I said, Dad, this isn't what I qualified for. And he said, no, it'll work good for you in the future. Yeah, you'll understand certain things which you don't understand now. Fair enough. And then I decided after about 2 years, let me apply for a job. So one of the firms which I applied for, Manchester City Council, and there were some other Muslims. This is not non-Muslims, these are Muslims. They said, if you want to come into the city council, you have to reduce the size of your beard. Yeah, I was told the same thing. And when I got the job there without reducing my beard, alhamdulillah, the first thing which I wanted to know was, can I pray salah here? Okay, he went all the way to the assistant director of housing, like, Khalid wants to pray salah here. Okay, and then they said, well, there's other Muslims here who don't pray salah. Okay, so I came across these types of hurdles, and people do. Now, when you say people are afraid to talk about it, one good thing which I had was there was a brother older than me. He had a very big beard and big man, and he was doing quite well in the city council, so he was respected. So I was like shadowing him. But a lot of people don't have that, and like as in your case, it seems as if you were like on your own, coming back to your lecturer and then finding out what to do and going. Otherwise, if you had somebody already in a good position, it would make things easier for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you have people who can guide you, then it makes life a lot easier.
Somebody to take the lead, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Who's already been through that hurdle.
Absolutely.
And open so many paths for you.
Yeah, there's many, like my cousin, he went as far as special branch in the police force, but he said that the amount of racism he used to get when he joined the police force, we know other people who joined the army as well, same thing, but because those people like yourselves have pushed the mark and are already there, now other people who are coming into the profession, it makes sense that you help them, you guide them, you mentor them, because you've been through those. And I think one of the problems that we find, I've spoken to a number of people, different organizations, the people who are already there are afraid to mentor others because of their own position.
I think partly that was more truer 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
I think now people are more comfortable where they are. And I think one of the primary reasons for that is because more and more of Muslims are getting into education. They are not now the first generations that came to set up businesses. They were employees. They worked as long as they could to give us the best platforms that they could. We now have those platforms, and our generations have now gone to universities for many, many years. I was reading an article a few days ago, and they said, I think it was 2 years old, and they said over 300,000 Muslim students were in colleges at the moment. So those numbers are going up and up, and obviously the higher that number is, and the more Muslim students are in higher education and they're getting more professional jobs, I think it would pave the way.
Yes.
I think the primary issue when I say people are afraid to talk about it, I think it is those people who've actually made it to the top or somewhere to the top.
Right. Okay. The very top.
And because they've made it through to the top either by, excuse the expression, but for want of a better expression, they've toed the line, and they don't want to rock the boat, and they have made it, and they are now in the twilight of their career, and they don't want to go out with a negative image, so they are afraid I think from that perspective. But I think people who are the younger generation is much more free to discuss these things, and I think as time goes you will find that more and more people from a younger generation are able to talk and are willing to talk, and not only that, because they are now educated to a better and higher level, they are more eloquent in the way that they talk, and they can express and get that message across much more clearer. One of the other problems I think we've had as a community, if I look back to my childhood, and I think when people in my age group, when we were growing up, and the generations before us, if you spoke to your parents and you said, what do I do, they will all push you towards certain professions. You'd either be a medic, or you'd be a lawyer, or you'd be an engineer, or there was the IT field.
And that's where these cliches came from, isn't
absolutely.
It?
And
we still use them till today.
It is, and you never broke free of that. And those were sort of the areas where every parent wanted their child to go to.
Nowadays, we had an English cricket captain as well, so you know.
So nowadays, I think you will find, and I see a lot of people who now take their children, for example, to play football with a football club or a cricket club. So the horizons are broadening.
Absolutely.
It's more of us becoming more diverse, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
And plus, as the generations become more educated, they're more exposed to this environment. I think that level of trust also builds.
I think the confidence levels are better, of course, and
the fear is reduced.
But then if you take a step back again and you go back 20 years, you will see that a lot of our communities didn't really interact with our councillors or MPs.
That's right.
We didn't really have that many councillors or MPs as Muslims, but those who were here, whether they were Muslims or non-Muslims, as a community, we didn't engage with them. And I still think that there is some fault on our part, even now, that we don't engage with people unless we have to. There is a barrier. So, for example, if we would go and see our local councillors. For example, if I'm extending a house and I'm having issues with my planning permission, I'll go and see my councillor. What I won't do is I will not take an active part in building a relationship with my councillor, with my MP. And it all then comes down to educating. Letting people know who you are and what your needs are. Because if you don't communicate it, who else is going to do it on your behalf?
That nicely goes into when we're talking about understanding and education. So I was going to ask you this, and maybe you can expand on this as well from what you're saying. For understanding, you need education. And education comes from people who already have skills, talents, experience in that field. So then those people who have, for example, been through the ranks and are nearer the top, isn't it a good idea to start to educate them? Because then they are the ones that will be able to mentor the ones coming behind.
So, so the way I consider this is this. Imagine you're at the ground floor of a tall building. You get into a lift, you press the button to go to the penthouse suite at the top. You reach there. Now that's the person who's made it to the top.
Yeah.
So they've reached the top. For somebody else to reach that, the lift has to come down,
Right.
and then the person at the top has to send it down for somebody else to get on it, and then
Okay.
to make the same journey again. And that's how I understand that. And I think the problem is if you go to people who are now at the height of their profession, at the top of their profession, it would really take people with a lot of guts to now change the narrative with which they've reached to the top. So if I go back to what I was telling you with
Okay.
my lecturer,
Uh-huh.
when he said to me, he said, shave your beard and you'll get a job in a top firm. And he said, you can grow your beard back anytime after that.
Right.
So you change the narrative, once you get there. You change the perception of people once you get there. And my view was that my beard should not be a barrier to me succeeding in my profession. Whatever level it would be at, it didn't really matter to me. But it needed to be somewhere where I would be happy. What I wasn't prepared to do was to shave my beard, change the perception or the narrative with which I was going to go, and then change again. So it takes a lot for people to do, and I know people who've done that.
Right.
And I have known people who have changed their names and kept a
Yeah.
more English name
Lord.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
because they wanted to secure a job or they wanted to secure a position, and they have gone through that change.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not here to judge anyone, and it is not up to us to judge people. People have their own aims and objectives and goals, and they want to reach it however they can. But I think those barriers now, because the population as it is much more diverse than it used to be, and it will continue to become more and more diverse. There will be more and more Muslims going into all sorts of professions. We've got now Muslims who are teachers. We've got Muslims in politics. We've got Muslims in the police, in the fire services, in the army, you name it, in every
Yeah.
profession.
Yeah.
And
Chief Constable is Muslim as
absolutely,
well.
and
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
so I think with time these things would become easier. Now these are things that we as a community can do, which is to make the effort. Then there are influences which come from the outside.
Can I
those-
just backtrack just a little bit?
Sure.
We're mostly talking about employment here. Like Islamophobia, can we expand? Which other areas of life does it affect? I mean, I was thinking about more like good neighbors.
It would
and-
affect
yeah.
everything, I think. Look, it's Islamophobia is not limited to employment only. I think our conversation has
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
gone in that direction.
Immigration, for example. Yeah.
It is in every facet of life
Every
that you
area of life,
experience.
absolutely,
It could
yeah.
be from as simple as to go through airport security
Yeah.
because of the way you look, because of the clothes that you wear, because of the hijab that a woman has, or a beard that you have, or a mama sharif that you're wearing. You will be scrutinized much more through security. I have witnessed that personally myself.
Right.
I have, and it is not pleasant for the person who's going through it. It's never happened to me, but I've witnessed other people going through it.
Right.
So it could be anything. It could be absolutely anything.
Gotcha. One thing, we don't want to frighten the audience, but we want to be real. And a number of people, when I say, oh, we're going to do Islamophobia, one of the first questions is, so when are they going to kick us out of the country? Yeah, so there's another side to it as well, which is genocide. So you must have heard about like the 5 steps to genocide. Like France is on number 2, Britain's in number 1, China's number 5, etc. So as regards Britain and Muslims, do you see, according to the present environment, do you see some change happening, major changes happening, let's just say in the next 10, 20 years? So is it going to get worse, better, or what do you feel?
So I think there are external factors, and those external factors come from geopolitics all around the world,
Right.
which dictate the policies within each country. So
Like, for example, what's happening in Afghanistan, how would that affect us?
Well, before we get to Afghanistan, but let's
Okay.
get to France, which
France,
is
okay.
France is really close.
Let's go next
it's
door.
very close.
Okay.
So
But isn't France just at an extreme anyway?
Yes, but
for not just now, it's for quite a while. They have a reputation of doing that now.
no, absolutely. But
has it influenced us till date?
Have the influence. Let me just put in there, Islamophobia. If we track the history of Islamophobia, it goes all the way back to the 8th century. 8th century, when the Umayyad dynasty first interacted with the French empires.
Yes.
And it was the French empires
Yeah.
who then started labeling those words like Saracens and barbarians.
Yes. Yeah.
Islamophobia actually began then.
Mhm.
Misrepresentation of the Muslims. You know, they'd come back and in their travel diaries that I'd met these Saracens and I met these barbaric people, the Mohammedans and what have you.
Yeah.
Islamophobia actually began with the French. They are the pioneers and the leaders in the market when it comes to Islamophobia.
Yeah.
They actually, I mean, we've got someone who's an expert in law. They actually paved the way for law. Okay, a lot of countries actually followed their constitution, followed their way of law. You know, they start getting active in LGBT. Other countries will start getting active in LGBT. They are actually the market leader,
Right.
when it comes to
Right.
shaping perception.
And then
like that.
Crusades came afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, the reason I pointed at France in this, you know, discussion is because as we said that they are our neighbors. So
Yeah.
it does impact.
Yes.
We live in a very small world now. Everything is very easily accessible. So the trends, doesn't matter if we talk about trends from Afghanistan, the trends from France or our local neighbors in Europe will also catch on.
Absolutely.
So I think before we go any further, we have to look around us, you know, and everything that's happening around us at the moment is, I wouldn't say it's not only it is promoting Islamophobia, but it is also promoting a non-religious society in every respect that you look at.
Yes, become more secular in that
more,
sense. Yeah.
more
Yeah.
secularism.
Yeah.
And those are the external factors which will continue to affect all Muslims all over the world, especially here now. As Muslims, Islam is a way of life for us. It's not just about going to the mosque for a few hours in a week. It is a way of life, and if your way of life has different connotations and different sides to what other people, generally the secular state, you know, for example, would want to promote, then there's going to be a conflict in the two.
But what we're talking about here is not breaking the tide, the rising tide, as we say, of secularism. But what we're trying to do is coexist.
I was just going to, you know, come on to that. So where you have the conflict, the idea then is to how do you understand it? And then it goes back to the very first point that I said is about understanding. In order to understand and make people understand as to who you are and what your needs are, you need to have that constructive dialogue, which as a community, as Muslims, I think we've lacked a lot. But I think, again, we're bridging that gap because we're having more dialogue more frequently. And this forum, this platform, this is precisely what we're doing. We're having a discussion to try and understand where we've come from and where we're going with this, and hopefully get people on board and inspire people to take more active role.
Yeah, well, we're going to actually come to the practicalities in a bit, but of course social media is a really powerful tool that we can use as we're using now.
Can I put in there? I actually wrote a 3,000 essay on that very point there.
Okay.
Tracking Islamophobic tropes in the media. The media is actually what forms and shapes social perception.
Yes.
If we look at everything that, you know, you said these stereotypes, judging people by the stereotypes, where did they come from? They came from the media. You know, you talk about education.
Yeah.
Changing Islamophobia doesn't begin in the educational level. It begins on where knowledge is first taken. In this society that we live in, people don't first learn when they go to school.
No. Yeah.
In fact, they don't even learn when they're at school.
Yeah.
They learn when they come home from school and they switch on the TV.
Yeah.
Through comedy, through entertainment. In there, you'll see certain Islamophobic tropes. For example, the bad guy in the movie's always got a beard.
Yeah.
And, you know, and before he's going to blow, he's going to shout Allahu Akbar.
Yeah.
These are the things that led to those Islamophobic tropes being created, those stereotypes. What we must do is have the same level of activism, meaning get involved in the media and create a positive perception of Muslims.
So if you remember, there was a film many years ago, Four Lions.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah.
It's a very good
and
film.
that was the very first attempt, I think, to make Muslims and Islam paint in a lighter note, because the background to that was you had 9/11, and you had certain other events around the world. Then the film came, and everybody was able to laugh about a lot of the themes in the film. And I think if you look again in the past 20 years and you look at artists and films which are being made, I think you will see again more and more Muslims are now entering into that field. And again, that helps that dialogue and understanding.
We sometimes advertise on the podcast as soon as you mention something useful. Alchemia was good in America, and it's a Muslim film production company. Not that he's my friend Masoud Khan from Aylesbury, but he owns good shares in it as well. And basically what they try to do is they try to promote, and they work with many non-Muslims as well. They try to promote Islam in a light way, in a more amusing way, as well as a wise way. Now, we have many Muslim comedians now as well. I was in fact going through YouTube looking at like the Muslim comedians, and they would joke about bombs on planes and stuff like that, but the way that they would say it, they would make the audience laugh. Now, before that, I turned to another clip of Muhammad Ali. Now, the boxer, he was a legend. The way that he would make even racist people laugh and like him, I mean, it was just totally amazing. So one of the things, and I looked at like Mehdi Hassan in his Oxford debate as well, etc. And I was talking to some Shia colleagues earlier on today about that. But the thing is, what I found is personalities really make a difference. And we were coming to this conclusion that what we need to do is famous Muslim personalities, whether they're in the sports or in the entertainment industry, anywhere, we need to tap onto them and create certain platforms, because other people do the same. Other people do the same. Other groups do the same.
They're the people at the top of that building.
Absolutely.
They are the people.
They're there, and they influence people so much.
You see, the trends have changed. Again, you go back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. The role models would be people in your own household, in your own families. Now that's not the case. The role models are the footballers, the actors,
absolutely,
the comedians, people in social media. So those are the role models, and those people are doing more, and I think will continue to do more as more and more people come. And again, you said about comedians making a lighter note of the issues, certain issues, stereotypes. If you tried to do that 25 years ago, it just couldn't happen.
It wouldn't take off.
Absolutely not. In fact, you'd probably
get a big backlash.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as time goes, as time elapses, I think more and more people will be able to take to that platform and be able to deal with these issues. But those are the people, at the top, who can influence certain people. But to get to that point, it has to start from the ground level. That ground level is really important. And I think what we have to do again as a community is we have to now consider our next generations. If we've made it to the top and we're now at the top of the building, we've got to think about the people who are still standing at the ground floor. People who are coming through the ranks. How are we going to train them? How are we going to build leadership skills in our people? How are we going to build communication skills in our younger generations? How are we going to teach them and give them the tools so they can now take that mantle in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and become those role models for people, and then be able to influence that public perception, the public narrative. And perception, you will see, is everything. As Hafsab mentioned, social media changes perception. Nowadays, it doesn't matter whether the perception is based on fact or not, as long as it is content which is catchy. If it catches your attention, it will change you. Now, sometimes what you will see is tweets or posts on Facebook or any social media which are negative. Now, you've got to be intelligent enough to read that and think, do I respond to this now, or do I leave it alone? Because sometimes what would happen is, if you respond to it, you'll spend 2 hours having a debate over text messages with people who may be anywhere in the world you've never seen, and all you're doing is you are airing their negative views and giving them a bigger audience than they would have had.
Yeah, fueling it
otherwise.
more. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to take stock of the situation and think, okay, you know what, I'm going to leave you alone. And then, or another tactic which is actually very useful, which I have seen many people use in the past, and I try to do the same. If you find a negative post, what you do is you counter that with a positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
it changes the narrative of the discussion.
Yeah, swings it in another way instead of collision head on. Yeah.
And the other thing that would do is, if you are able to change the angle of that discussion with your one post, the post which will follow thereafter, the discussion level will change, and it will actually, if somebody's put any text on to get negative publicity, it will completely demolish the intentions with which they started. So you've got to be very clever in how you deal with it.
Really important. Yeah, you mentioned Hafiz Fahim and perception in one sentence. Hafiz Fahim led a podcast here a couple of weeks ago just on perception. Alhamdulillah, well read on it. One thing that we talk about the religious community. I'm going to say something daring here now. We say the ulama are the ones who are educated in the formal Islamic sciences. And then the reason for the ulama to be so educated is to have an impact on society. What we're saying is really these days they're only having an impact on a small section of society. Whereas when you come across, for example, Habib, the wrestler, or you come across some famous football stars who are Muslims, and they say one thing and it goes like worldwide, and that affects people much more. Why? And I think this is a part of perception as well. People admire them, people look up to them. Yeah, and one of the things that we suggested, and we've actually started a certain initiative, is to make because Islamic education is really important. Even Habib says, I'm not a role model, I'm not an alim. Yeah, go to an alim. Okay, so we want to make those of our ulama, and there's some ulama in this room now as well listening, make them superstars. In other words, make them famous. They, in the past, many of our ulama were like herbalists, as we mentioned. Yeah, but today I think ulama need to be famous TV personalities. Yeah, they need to be people into, for example, sports. I mean, we some of these people who are into these professions, I was surprised when I found out they were actually well read in the deen, if not alims. Yeah, and when they speak, even political leaders like you go Turkey, for example. Yeah, and you see why are the leaders there talking more about Islam is because they went through an Islamic education system. So I think when we're talking about education, I don't mean just talking about like what Islamophobia is and how to just tell people that Islam is not what you think, but Islam is love, etc. But I also think that it's really important to educate our students who are becoming alims now, from now on, how to also win high in the dunya, in the world. Because one of our teachers when I was young used to say, be the best in the deen and be the best in the dunya. And we used to think like, scratch our heads like, well, why do you want to be best in dunya? Isn't that like opposite? He said, no. When we say dunya in this sense, not in the Sufi terminology, it doesn't mean sin. It doesn't mean sin.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is what we need to understand.
You can't blame the elder generation of ulama for not having that role in society today.
No, of course not.
It's a natural result of the post-migration period.
We have to build on that.
They had a bigger task of preserving the deen.
Yes.
And they've done that. Now they're handing over that task of the thriving of deen within this context to the next generation. So you can't really blame the elder generation for not being able to impact Islamophobia, what have you.
Yeah, inshallah.
See, if you talk about sciences, Islamic sciences, or you talk about the secular education, the one thing I think which occurs is that so a lot of our ulama who are now born and bred here in the UK, there is a skill to communicating the knowledge that you have.
Yeah.
So they may have gone through the traditional, Dars-e-Nizami, or they could have gone through at the same time with secular education, etc. But sometimes there are additional courses that you can do to improve your skill sets.
Presidential skills, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, communication skills. Yeah.
It doesn't always come naturally to everyone. You have to work at it. You have to learn certain skills, and sometimes they come with experience, and sometimes they come with exposure. Now, we're sometimes afraid to expose ourselves to things that we are not necessarily comfortable with. I was contacted by a young scholar who is studying law at the moment, and he had.
Is he an Islamic scholar?
Yes,
studying law.
Studying law, yes, and he has an advocacy exam, coming up, and he stutters a lot.
Right.
Okay. Now, but when he recites the Quran, he doesn't. At all.
Yeah.
You can ask him any time to recite the Quran, he would not stutter once. But if you ask him to speak in English and you give him a page to read, he'll probably stutter a few times. So he was really, really nervous about this. So I said to him, look, all you've got to do is just calm right down. Stop thinking about what you're going to say. Just say it. And slow down, take a deep breath. And I learned over the years, speaking to a number of people and organizations I was involved with, that a lot of times people who stutter, it's not because they have a physical deformity of any sort or a disability. It's because their mind is working ahead of the communication of the brain with the tongue. And so I said to him, just slow down and slow how you speak, slow your speech down, and everything else will fall into place. And he was really afraid of this, and he went and alhamdulillah he practiced, and he sent me a video of his advocacy that he was going to perform. Now, other than the fact that alhamdulillah he sorted out the issue of stuttering, but the way he was communicating, it wasn't effective. It is a skill that you have to learn. So I said to him, look, in order to do this, you're going to have to learn that skill. You are becoming an alim, and you're going to be a student for the rest of your life. But you have to now communicate that knowledge that you've got to the public. And now in order to do that, you've got to be good in your oratory skills. And he has to improve on that. And I think we have to guide people like that to be able to effectively pass that message on. It is now, once you've got that skill set, you've got to now improve it. So for example, look, a Hafiz, if his or her tajweed is not right, they would work on it to get the tajweed right. They would go to different usatidha, teachers, to get it right. In the same way, skill sets are the same. You will go and you will try and improve it. But at all times, in order to improve something, somebody needs to be telling you this needs improving, which means you need a teacher, you need a guide all the way through. Which is the Islamic perspective of how we deal with everything. And then at the same time of doing that, you need support around you. So for example, if we look at our demographics and our older generations, and I look at my childhood, we were fortunate enough to have family all around us, and it was the family who was saying to you, do this, yes, do this, don't worry, if it doesn't work, we're here. So you need that support group. The same thing applies to ulama who are young. They need support. They may not be able to relate to the older generation of ulama in the same way, because now the current crop of ulama that we have, they have secular education, they've been to colleges and universities, and our elder scholars may not have gone through that in this environment. They've gone through it in another country, but not in this environment. So I think again, it's having that support around them. Once they start to take off, you have to have support around them.
You know, maybe
get them
Hammad
through
Sahib doesn't know, but on this podcast, what we try to do is we leave something practical for the audience to do. Yeah, and we try to do that as much as possible. And now, not putting anybody on the spot, but you mentioned Hafiz. We have a Hafiz sitting next to you now. We mentioned support for our young scholars. You are a president of a masjid, of a committee. You have a central masjid as well. And one of the important things that I personally and a number of my friends promote is basically three things. We say that any organization or any masjid should take their young ulama and basically sponsor them to do counseling, presentation or communication skills. And even we say law degree. Why? Because you've done law. When you do law, your mindset changes somewhat and you're more articulate in certain areas as the way you speak and present yourself as well. But especially communication skills, yeah, and counseling as well. Why? Because with counseling, you have to deal with the public. If you're not impacting the public, what use are you?
Sure.
That's the main, yeah. So one of the things that we have to do is not just support the young ulama with good wise words and but we need incentives, like practical incentives. On the other side, here's the other side, not everybody is becoming an alim. And with us, with our youngsters, we do have organizations like, for example, we got 3Meme, we got Guidance Hub, who deal with like leadership skills. They do courses on that. Yeah, we have some of our, alhamdulillah, Muslim MPs as well. They are mentoring youngsters also. So the thing is, there is this trend starting, but it's not fast enough. Yeah, it's not fast enough. So we need to shout
so
out
let me,
here.
Answer your question in smaller parts.
Yeah.
Okay. So practical steps first.
Yeah.
In terms of Islamophobia, if we go back to the topic which we began, what can we do as a community, as a group about Islamophobia? And I think one of the things that we as a community must do is engage in a positive dialogue with our councillors and our MPs, because that is where policy and law is made.
Legislation, yeah.
They are the ones who have to go and represent us. We vote for them. And I think what we have to be able to do is we have to be able to say to them, because the currency that they understand is votes.
Yeah.
That's the currency.
Yeah.
That's the currency we hold.
Yeah.
We give it away quite cheaply. We shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And as a community, what we should be doing is we should be saying to people, okay, we as a community in this area or in this constituency have so many votes. You want those votes? What are you going to do for us as a community?
Mm-hmm.
These are our needs.
Okay.
This is what we need.
Uh-huh.
And then you talk in those terms. You build those relations. It's not just about trading your votes for the work they do, but actually educating them. And I'll give you a very practical example.
Because this has been going on for years now. The debate in Parliament regarding Islamophobia, and we've not got anywhere yet. So
of course,
yeah,
it's because I think there has to be a will, to conclude something.
Yeah,
it's
but
easy to start something.
Yeah,
but there has to be a will to conclude it.
Uh-huh.
Now, I was going to give you an example, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who may be able to relate to this. So the area where I live is predominantly non-Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
non-Asian area.
Okay.
So most of the people who live there are white background, professionals or ex-professionals. So when I moved into that area, one of my neighbors who's retired, he actually thought that as Muslims, we don't cut our hair at all.
Right.
And somebody had led him to believe that as Muslims, we don't trim trees in our back garden or cut our grass.
Okay.
And I do not know why he would think that, but one day he was walking past my house, and he's a keen gardener, and every time I drive past, he's got beautiful flowers all year round. So I decided, I'm going to get some ideas of him, how to make our garden look as beautiful as his. So I invited him in, offered him a cup of tea and coffee. We sat in the back garden, and he asked me this question outright. He said, I've heard you don't cut your hair, you don't cut the trees, you don't And I was sat down, I was thinking, look around you.
Yeah.
You know, if I hadn't cut my hair, they'll be all the way down here.
Yeah.
And look at the trees around you. You know, look at the plants and look at the grass. And as it transpired, once I started to speak to him, there were a lot of things he didn't understand about Islam. He did not actually know what Islam was. He didn't actually know what a Muslim was. It was just something he'd read in a tabloid somewhere, or somebody he was speaking to at a gathering who gave him certain ideas, and he had held on to those for God knows how many years, because nobody ever went and lived in that area as Muslims.
Yeah.
And we were the first ones to go there. And when we spoke to him and told him, you know, everything is absolutely fine and everything is hunky-dory, and if he ever needs anything and he can't get around, he's more than happy to knock on and say, you know, if you're around Manchester, can you pick this up for me? And we're more than happy to do it. So it's about building those you know, relationships.
Grassroots level as well.
Grassroots level.
Yeah.
And that's with councillors and your MPs. So that's a positive thing, a step, a practical step that we as a community must do.
Can I ask one thing that, you know, policymakers, just to make it clear for the audience, not everybody can become an MP. Not everybody can influence the MP. You know, you need to know a certain amount of knowledge or have certain skill sets to do that. But, you know, when we talk about policymakers, because I met one recently and he was never an MP, but he worked in central government as a policymaker. What about aiming for jobs like that? Does that make any difference?
Of course, everything would make a difference. So you've got, obviously, you've got the politicians at the forefront.
Yeah.
You've got, you know, civil servants who work in the background.
Civil servants, yeah.
And they do all the legwork.
Absolutely.
But they're never on TV, so you don't see them.
You don't, yeah.
But they do everything in the background, and they can and do influence policy changes, because when MPs or councillors or anybody, when they need guidance on something, they will go to
them.
The civil servants in the background, and they will say, what's been happening here? And these people will then come in and they will say, okay, this, and you can do this, and you can. So yes, you can influence change in many different ways. You don't have to become an MP, but I think as a community, we have to identify people who can convey the message, who can relate to people, who can make them understand of our needs, and then we need to promote those people to represent that community, to go and have that dialogue.
Excellent.
So as a practical step, that's the first thing. I think the second thing that as a community, you know, we can do is, whenever we don't always have to react to something, you know, negative.
Right.
I think we have to be careful in, as I say, with social media, especially now, everything spreads like, you know, wildfire. You choose what you want to respond to. You don't have to be a keyboard warrior every single time. And
even on the streets, you know, like you know, we were talking about workplaces, but even on the streets, we're on I remember a long time ago we were on a march when what happened in Bosnia, and you could see like he seemed like an retired army officer with his wife on Deansgate. We were going towards the town hall, and he said, "You Pakis go home," you know, the famous old phrase. So I just nicely went up to him, very, very nicely. And I said, so, like, who are you? Like, where do you come from? In other words, this was an empty island before. Are you Saxon, Norman, Roman, you know, Viking? Who are you? Sort of thing. And he was like, because he was, now the thing is, but the way I said it was like, as nicely as possible, so he didn't actually feel offended, and the expression from his face, like, you know, he wasn't going to get me back with something else. But the thing is that I just couldn't, and that was when I was young. As I, you know, what you're saying here, as I grew older, you know, sometimes if somebody you know, gives you a racist swear word or something as you're going past in the car, or, you know, standing at the bus stop, it happens to a number of us, you just ignore it. And it's sometimes actually better to ignore it. And one workplace where I started, there was this, I don't know why he was jealous of me, but he thought, you know, like, people were liking me and maybe he's gang, and I wasn't intentionally doing any of this, but I was just standing with the staff one day, and he came upstairs and he just went off on one. We were like looking at him like shocked, and he was like, from distance he was just shouting and this, and I was like quiet and I didn't say and I said, but, you know, I think the only thing I said was, but what happened? Like, what did I do wrong? You know, that kind of simple. And he went back down. And then the other staff said, wow, you know, you could have said something back to him and you didn't. In fact, it was my father. He used to always say to me, you know, dads are an influence. You know, Khalid, be a role model. And I was always thinking, what's a role model? And he said, have sabr here in this dunya and have ajr in the future. In fact, in the days of Imam Hussain, I
was just going to link to that. There are times where silence is the wise thing to do, and there are times where activism is required and a voice. Use your voice. We live in a time where rights are being recognized since the UN Charter of Human Rights. Let's use that against them, or use that for us, we should say, rather than against them. Be vocal. There is something you can do on every single level of society. Take a lesson from Imam al-Hussein, is that don't be afraid. Absolutely. Don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. You know what they're scared of about Islam. There's nothing actually to be scared about religion. You know, even in the times of war, we can't even harm a tree. We're not scary people.
Yeah, so I think it's lack of understanding again, isn't it? I mean, if you go back, I think it was 2018. There was these going around the mosque. Punish a Muslim Day or something.
That's right.
Now, as a community, I think we did the absolute right thing. We contacted the police. We said, okay, you know what? We're not going to react to this. We're going to carry on with our lives as we are. And we let the police deal with it, and we did, and we let the police deal with it, and the police, dealt with it. We had Boris Johnson make that comment about burqas, right? So you've got people; these are external influences which we can't control. But what we can do is when it happens at that level, where the Prime Minister has made a comment which is discriminatory. It is racism. Yes, we have to call it out at that point.
Yes.
And this is, again, if you go back to the first point I made, is having that dialogue with your local MPs, your local councillors. They will understand it. If you say that you were offended, they'll understand why you were offended. So one of the biggest problems we've got at the moment is, so we have material which is used in Europe at the moment against the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, people don't understand why do we hurt so much as Muslims, because they don't understand what our relationship is. And not everybody does. Some people understand it but use that hurt to incite hatred in others. But as a community, what we need to do is we need to educate people around us that, look, if this is hurtful, why is it hurtful and what does it mean to us as Muslims? And if we can't communicate that, we would struggle. I mean, I've had conversations with a lot of lawyers when I've attended court on cases, and I have conversations, with them quite regularly. And a lot of them do understand, and some of them don't understand. But over a period of time, you have dialogue with them. You start to communicate. They start to know you as to who you are, and things make a difference.
So going back to two things. One thing is the role of the mosques to be a platform where we can. I know certain mosques around England where they have a very good relationship with their MPs and their councillors, and even the local magistrates and the head of police as well, and they invite them in. Special occasions as well. Absolutely. They eat food together. They talk about this. They educate the community. They have interfaith meetings also. They invite people. Some of them, we have a Scientologists. Look how much, alhamdulillah, the Muslims are expanding out some great hope. So Muslims are now interacting with Scientologists, Moonies, Jehovah's Witnesses,
everyone,
Hell's Angels,
absolutely,
people like that. So alhamdulillah, we do have great. And one of the I go around with the team sometimes, and we do this even if it's in the parks, and they say, like, one of the questions we asked, like, why are you so nice? And so, well, what do you mean? He said, that's not exactly the perception that we get. And I said, well, I'll tell you why we're so nice, is because we believe that we're all related. And they said, what do you mean by that? Like, we're like cousins. He said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, we believe that we're all from Adam and Eve, aren't we? So we're like brothers and sisters, and you respect one another. And I said, even if you're not a Muslim, I mean, there's something called humanity before religiosity. But even if you're not a Muslim, you have feelings.
Habib Ali al-Jifri.
Habib al-Jifri, I was going to mention. I mentioned that earlier on. Actually,
good book.
today we had a good discussion about this. It's a beautiful book, and it actually went quite viral. That one, yeah. And it was alhamdulillah. So understand that we know just because you're not a Muslim, you're still a human. You have feelings, and you can get hurt. You have thoughts like we have thoughts. You've got families. You need to earn. You have to look after yourself and the communities. And alhamdulillah, Muslims are expanding. And one of the beautiful things, I really love this. Before, Muslims were afraid. Maybe it was the language barrier as well with the first generation to talk in that kind of way. But one thing I have to give the older generation, they were very giving. Like, for example, in our communities, our mums or aunties, when they used to make food, they used to want to give it to the next door, and they used to think, oh, this is strange, like, and then they began to give back as well, and then suddenly
but it started a dialogue, right?
It started a dialogue.
Absolutely.
So they did actually set us some beautiful platform.
I've seen old English people who've got no relatives, no nothing, leave their house in inheritance to Muslim people.
Subhanallah.
Because your parents used to do this and that for me.
Wow.
They used to bring food every Eid for me.
It goes back to having a dialogue with people. It breaks the barriers down.
Yeah.
We as humans have a lot more in common with each other than the differences, between us.
Absolutely.
And again, when I was saying to you before that if you see a negative post on social media, you don't always have to react in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the positive spin on that would be to bring out what is in common.
Yes.
So one of the things which spirals out of control very quickly on social media is political issues in Afghanistan, in Iraq or Palestine or anywhere else. It spirals out of control, very quickly. So if you break it down to the very basics again, where do you begin from? You begin from the very basic human rights for everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody has a right to life, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what background you're from. So if you take it back to the very basics and start to, because you first have to deconstruct that image, bring it back to the very basics, and then reconstruct it in a positive image, and that is how you change
the Ghazali approach. Absolutely, mashallah.
But that's how you change the narrative, don't you?
Subhanallah, subhanallah. There's 5 steps of genocide. The first part, and how do they actually start off on this, is to say that they are different to us. Yeah, that they are not as worth as what we are worth. And when they start showing that somebody is different, people begin to dehumanize groups, and they start dehumanization that you have to humanize again now.
Look, what happened with Brexit?
Yeah.
So it's only a recent
thing,
past, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what happened with Brexit? The whole narrative on Brexit became about immigration. And it wasn't immigration from Southeast Asia. It was immigration from Eastern Europe. So that in itself is discrimination and racism.
Absolutely.
Why? Because you're now categorizing, putting markers down from people because they're coming from a region. And you are now classifying everybody. You're painting everyone with the same brush.
Yes.
And again, it was a narrative. And whether that narrative was based on any factual information or not made absolutely no difference. So you have to change the narrative when it is going in a direction. Sometimes it is changed by what you say. Sometimes it will be changed by somebody else who's attained that the top level in their profession, and they will look. We had during the European Year Championships now in just a few weeks ago you had an interview with Paul Pogba. What did he do? He just picked up a bottle and moved it out of the way. That's all he did. But it changed. It started a discussion, changed the narrative of that whole thing, changed the image of what was going on. So yes, sometimes it takes one individual. You've got now a positive and another recent example. You've got a Rashford football player. Through the pandemic, he started that initiative of feeding kids. Something very, very positive. I know a lot of Muslims who became involved, a lot of other restaurants, etc., who've been doing it for many years, but they didn't get the traction that he got. Because he is a public figure. So sometimes, yes, it takes that. But again, to get to that level, I think I would go back and say we have to go back. We have to make sure people are educated. We have to make sure they have the adequate support. And in my view, the way I look at it, for example, in Manchester Central Mosque now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to, again, focus back on education.
Right.
We're trying to focus on improving the quality of our teachers. We improve the quality of teachers. Tomorrow we'll improve the quality of our students.
Brilliant.
And then at the same time, if inshallah, if Allah allows us, and then we build the leaders from within the community. You can set markers within your classrooms, within your students, to see who is attaining and how well they're doing. And if there are people within that group, within your own mosques, who you think are who have the potential, who have the work ethic, and you can identify them, then I think as a community, what we should do is we should support these people to try and make sure they reach their potentials, and push them in a direction where they can actually achieve. Keep them away from being diverted to other things which takes their focus away. But again, it's all about having that right chain process, the thought process there, making sure people have a goal to reach, make sure that they understand that they have certain potentials. I mean, I all the way when I look back now, when I was at college, at school, I saw a lot of my teachers telling each and every one of us, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. If your teachers can do it, then we can do it.
Absolutely. You know, the potential we're talking about here is obviously not just religious, but secular as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe
everything.
Mosques can have an affiliation with other education institutions or even employers, to reach out that, which might be a big thing to say, but there's nothing stopping us.
You have to aim as high as you can, and hopefully you'll get somewhere close to it.
Absolutely. That's the point.
But again, you have to have that thought process to even aim there first. You have to think about this. You have to start to plan it. You have to plan it from the grassroots up. You're never going to get there in a quick time. I know you were saying earlier about that it's taken a long time. Unfortunately, as a community, I think we're really behind. I think we are decades behind where we should be. There are many communities who are way ahead of us, and I think there's a lot of catching up that we have to do. I think there are a lot of positives in what we have been doing for the past 5 to 10 years, and we should carry on in that way. And inshallah,
and it's catching speed. The thing which we may be behind, but the momentum is increasing day by day.
Absolutely.
Like when I work in the community, I'm finding, like for example, in Oldham, there's a masjid, an organisation which collects to give to a children's ward there. They collect money and they give gifts, like on Eid and other times of the year. And I initially I thought, okay, that's a nice little thing to do. But then you see it in the papers, then you see it in the media, then you think, okay. Like for example, Christie's Hospital, whoever does anything for that suddenly gets in the media because people feel for those who've got cancer, etc. And when Muslims get involved in something like that, or even for example when you had the floods, Hebden Bridge and other places, and there were so many Muslim organizations there, and the momentum is really becoming very fast, which is a positive thing. And the other thing which I really wanted to say is, though we're talking about these negative impacts on our community, other communities are, like for example the black community or the Sikh community or other religious communities as well. They have their problems as well.
Sure.
And so then when we talk about having common values, even like we work with atheists and agnostics, and we have common values, common human values. So everybody should be recognizing. I mean, I went to the Sikh temple for one program, the Buddhist temple for another one, to the Hindu temple for another one, and they came to ours as well, which was really good. The important thing I think is to remember, because Islam gives hope. I mean, one of the biggest things that Hafasa will tell you is, without hope, in fact, hopelessness is kufr in certain context as well. And the thing is, one of the biggest things which I feel hope in is not that bad, in the sense that I remember after 9/11, some people, white host community here, were saying hello to us on the streets on purpose. How are you? Are you okay? After 9/11, so many of them. Yeah, just to show that, you know, we don't believe that narrative.
Yeah, there can be a positive.
Absolutely. And look, again, if you go back a few years, I think it was 2016 maybe, Sajid Khan and Zach Goldsmith for the London mayor elections, right?
Yeah.
So the narrative which Zach Goldsmith built was that Sajid Khan was helping extremists. So he came from a legal background.
Yeah.
So some of his clients were criminals. Of course, he practiced criminal law. So you know, they were accused of crimes, and he defended them. And so that narrative was built for over. I still remember many days. It was constantly on the news, and he didn't react. He carried on with his positive, messaging the way he wanted to, and the outcome of the election was that Zach Goldsmith, he lost.
Yeah.
So the public, not everybody just follows what they hear.
Yeah.
Just because, for example, if there is more negative coverage in the media, it doesn't mean the majority of the population follows that.
Yeah.
So the narrative in public and at the ground may be very different to what is aired on TV or you read in newspapers.
Yeah.
But again, I think that is changing slowly because more and more Muslims are getting involved with media, and they're becoming. And one of the, I think, most recent successful examples is Mehdi Hassan. He's done absolutely brilliant over here.
And I was in America with Al Jazeera, I think. Yeah. Absolutely.
So yes, there are a lot of positives, and they will continue to be, as long as I think we as Muslims we continue to do what is good and right for us.
One important thing, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. One important thing that you can tell us, Hammad Saab, and then we'll ask Hafiz Saab as well, so that the audience can go away not just feeling positive and hopeful, but something that they can do practical that will sort of show something in their lives that will help them to carry on. Because the way that the Islamic narrative runs, the Quranic narrative runs, is that we will come across challenges, like the great Sahaba came across challenges, and in these days Imam Hussein radhiyallahu Karbala as well. We will always come across challenges, and we shouldn't think of the challenges in any negative way or become hopeless in any kind of way. What would you leave the audience with that would give them what I call practical hope, like real hope?
I think again, so I'll go back very shortly. So when I changed over from a medical background to come into the legal background, into the legal profession, my older brother's friends had studied law but weren't able to secure jobs.
Right.
And they were saying to me, "You're absolutely silly for coming into this profession. It is so competitive." Some of them had finished their degrees 2 or 3 years before I started, and they told me I wouldn't get a job. But I always had a positive mindset, and I knew that whatever happens, I had tawakkul in Allah, that whatever happens,
there you go,
I'm going to land on my feet. And alhamdulillah, I have. There are people who I studied with, I went to university with, they did the law degree, but they couldn't get into the legal profession, so they've gone on to do other things. But I always had this belief in me that whatever happens, I will land on my feet, wherever it is, whether it was with a multinational law firm or whether it was my own practice or a high street practice. And I didn't really care. So I think you must have a positive mindset.
Absolutely.
And I think if you have a positive mindset, it will breed you to take positive steps rather than taking negative steps. And I think you become it then habitually changes your personality. You become less afraid of the challenges. I think you face the challenges head on. You don't shy away from them. As far as the issue of Islamophobia, which was the topic with which we started, and again, I would say dialogue is really important. Positive dialogue is important.
Right.
You must make sure that we engage with all faiths.
Yeah.
We must have multi-faith, interfaith, dialogue. We must have dialogue with our councillors and MPs who will then influence the policy making. We must have generations, getting into more professions, not just the 3 or 4 professions that we were all pushed towards as we were growing up, but sports, in media, in social media, in politics, and in design, in arts, in absolutely everything. And I think what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't try and push people to do something they don't enjoy. And one of the things that I think which is absolutely important is that you must do something which you enjoy, because if you enjoy it, you will do it far better, and you will want to do it, and you will want to succeed, and you will give it that time. I wanted to do law. I wasn't pushed into it. It was something I wanted to do. And when I was doing my GDL, it was done in 1 year, but I dedicated 15, 16 hours of my day to studying. I mean, I divorced the world. For that 1 or 2 years, I didn't do anything other than just study.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
I think you should always have that positive outlook. You should never, challenges will come on your way. But, I heard one of my teachers once tell me that, if you are a bright student in your class and your teachers want to test your potential, they give you hard questions to do, more challenging questions to do. And this is how Allah works.
Absolutely.
When Allah wants you to bring you closer to you, you have challenges in your life.
There's a hadith that إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِذَا أَحَبَّ الْعَبْدِ ابْتَلَاهُ.
Subhanallah.
When Allah loves a slave, He tests him. And just to reiterate what Hazrat said earlier, the ulama, they say, كُلُّ يَوْمٍ عَاشُورَاء وَكُلُّ أَرْضٍ كَرْبَلَاء.
Subhanallah.
Every day is a Ashura for you, and every land is a Karbala. Stand, don't be afraid, and have the Husseini approach to everything.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
Optimism.
MashaAllah. Jazakumullah khair. We thank the audience for joining us today, and Hammad Khan Sahab, Hafiz Fahim Sahab as well. And inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if Allah wills, in the future we will invite yourselves again.
Inshallah.
MashaAllah. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah, it was a pleasure to be here.
Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.